All right, here we go. So, 1 Kings, chapter 18. We're getting into the actual work of Elijah's ministry. But you're really, within this particular text, there's a lot of focus on this Obadiah guy. And if you're like me, you see this, and the first thing you do is, oh, well, that must be Obadiah from the Bible. No, not so much. Prophet Obadiah, 300 years after all of these events. So, totally different guy, totally different responsibility, so to speak, in terms of how the Lord uses him. But we're going to talk about that here in just a few minutes as well. But as it starts off, Elijah gets called out, and then he's going to the king, and we get this little behind-the-scenes look. I always like when the subtext is actually put in the text. And so here you have a little conversation between Ahab and Obadiah, and it's almost like the part in the movie where you're with the good guys, or you're with your hero, but then it cuts to the bad guy, And so you got the good guys making their plans and all these things that are getting ready to happen, but the camera cuts to the bad guy, and you see all that he's doing behind the scenes as the good guys are making their plans too. And so you see this in Braveheart all the time, Mel Gibson's doing his stuff, and then it cuts to the king, what's going on in the palace and all these different things. But anyway, so they're going out and they're going to try and find water. Why is Ahab trying to find water?
Save the animals.
Save the animals, yeah. I mean, goodness gracious, we got citizens dying all over the place. We got people struggling. We got widows who are going to eat biscuits and die, and all these different things. And Ahab's concern is, hey, we got to find some water and some grass for the mules. This is our big concern. And Obadiah's just like, okay, let's go find it. But we do get a little behind the scenes look at Obadiah and some of the things that he has been doing. He has been hiding 100 prophets of the Lord that Jezebel hadn't cut off their heads yet, and they're running scared. So he's been hiding them, splitting them up, and hiding them in caves, trying to make sure that they're able to continue to minister, hopefully, after all this mess is over with. I mean, that's always the hope of the people of God, is that you can get back to freely worshiping after all of this this horrible kingship is done. But Obadiah meets up with Elijah, and Elijah tells him, go and tell your king. And he says, what's plan B? Can we think of something else here? Because, and here's the most human part, I think, of it with Obadiah, because Obadiah knows what he's been doing. He knows that it pleases the Lord to try and save these people's lives, even if they weren't prophets of God, even if they were just believers and trying to save their lives. That would be something good in the eyes of God. But he realizes when put next to Elijah, and who is the most important, and if the Lord can only save one, who's going to get saved? He says, I'm going to go tell him this, and then the Spirit of the Lord is going to come and take you I don't know where. He's going to make sure you're hidden, but here I'm going to be left in front of the king saying, here's Elijah, and the king's going to say, where? And all of a sudden the king's going to say, oh, you've been talking to Elijah for the last 3 years, type thing. And so he just gets worried and he gets scared, and he balks at trying to fully get into what the Lord is wanting him to do. And so these characteristics of Obadiah, I think, are very similar to the average Christian today, because I think that the average professing Christian today is willing to take a little bit of risk. I think that the average Christian today is willing to sacrifice to a point.
Not like threatening.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that the average Christian today, when it comes to real hardship, would also have a tendency to balk, if for no other reason than we're just not used to it. We are just not used to having that type of, whether it is temptation or whether that type of danger, or having to sacrifice that much. These are things that we don't often think about, to the point where even as you're, even as you're a young man and you're in seminary and you're going through school and you're looking at places the Lord might be sending you to do ministry, and you're seeing it at the it's me, all right, it's me. Yeah, let's. You're looking at all the places that are Southern Baptist churches that are advertising through the 6 Southern Baptist seminaries and all these different things. And you see these different openings, and you see these different ministries that you could be a part of, and then you see where they're located. And even within America, you're like, I ain't going to Maine, and stuff like that. Nothing against Maine, I'm just saying. And so even in that sense, we're willing to sacrifice to a point. Now, I'd have been perfectly happy going to Maine. I'd probably have to do it by myself because Stephanie wouldn't go. But I could have, we could have worked all that out. But we're willing to suffer and to sacrifice and to stick our neck out to a point. And there always comes that point where, and I don't think it's necessarily straight out disobedience as much as it is a slow fade into the culture, to where we are more. There was actually, I can't even look it up because it's on my phone, and my phone's recording for Brendan Rex. But there was this person who posted this thing, and I can't remember who he was quoting here. But I just lost my train of thought. I might here. No, I'm not going to do it. I was just going to pause that first. I was just going to because it was on a Twitter feed, and I don't remember whose it was, and so but anyway. All that to say, I had a good example, but now I can't use it. But we are willing to sacrifice to a point, and we're willing to suffer to a point. But when it comes to actually going against the culture and going against the things that are going to be beneficial to us, or rejecting the things that are not going to be beneficial to us, that's where we really get into a testing of our faith. We will probably the average churchgoer in America will probably never have a Rack, Shack, and Benny moment where do this or I'm going to throw you into the fire. That is probably not going to happen. If it does in America, it's probably going to take a few years, and y'all won't have to worry about it. And so,
but we worry about it all.
Yeah, well, thanks, I appreciate it. But I think we will have, I know we will have instances where we have to push against the culture, and we have to do it in a compassionate way, but we have to do it in an uncompromising way that does put us in a little bit of danger. I mentioned the hockey player, the Russian hockey player. I thought it was an incredible story. At the same time, you had last week the March for Life, and Tony Dungy spoke at the March for Life. Tony Dungy's a Hall of Fame coach. He's an analyst for CBS Sports, one of the network's football coverages. And he had people, he's been an outspoken Christian for years. He's written books, and he's appeared in men's conferences and all these different things. There's no hiding that he's a Christian anyway. Certainly not hiding to the extent that Obadiah was trying to hide. But still, going out there, putting yourself out at a national thing like that, puts you a little bit more in the spotlight. And it's televised, and it's not just, you don't just have to buy a ticket for the conference. Anybody can see this now. And of course, he had people calling on that network to fire him. He's out of touch with Americans. He hates, women who have abortion, or he hates gay people, or whatever it may be. But all you're doing is you're standing in front of a podium, you're speaking into a microphone, and you're speaking biblical values, and the world hates you for it. And so there's always that temptation to compromise just a little bit, so that you can be buddy with people, and so you don't offend people. But as we see here, even in Elijah's day, even in a theocratic country of God's people, speaking God's truth is going to offend people, and speaking God's truth is going to cause you to go out on that limb and stick your neck out and possibly get hurt for it. But again, I would say this is the characteristic of the average Christian. Now I've got a question for you. Obadiah himself, within this story, and you can reread it real quick if you need to. But is Obadiah an example of faith, or is Obadiah a cautionary tale of people who think they have faith and really don't? So essentially, he does what Elijah asked him to do, but the character of Obadiah in this story, is he an example of faith, or is he a cautionary tale of someone who didn't have faith?
I just asked that question myself of the two sons who were asked to go and work in the father's vineyard. And, I've always said, who did the will of the Father? The one who went and worked.
Yeah.
And I don't know, today I was just thinking about that, and I thought, maybe neither.
Yeah.
Because one, obedience is now.
Yeah.
And I was like, so I'm at that same dilemma right here. And
But you can't say that now because you've been telling me this story
I know,
for encouragement for me all these years,
Exactly.
and now you're going to retract it.
You're strong enough now.
Oh, okay.
You don't even have an identity anymore. Who am I? I've been thinking like this then for
But
decades.
I really have, but
Yeah.
it just crossed my mind. And the same thing here.
Yeah.
Because I want to say he was a man of faith.
Okay.
I do, because he did, even though he was afraid and, all like that, he still did it. So anyway, Bobby, really, it showed he had faith.
Yeah. Well,
Faith was even if they kill me,
then I'm going. I need some encouragement first. You got to pep me. We got to throw a little pep rally before I go into it. But yeah, I'm going to go do it. The reason I ask that is because throughout recorded Judeo-Christian history, you have had Jewish rabbis and Christian pastors, priests, who have seen it both ways, have seen Obadiah as an example of faith and as a cautionary tale of someone who doesn't have faith. And so it's very interesting, especially among you kind of see the evolution of it, and really more the evolution of the West with the Puritans and some of their writings, are people who have are from Puritan background, even Jonathan Edwards and people like that, of how they look at the person of Obadiah, and really all people who are put in a similar position. Is this a man of faith, or is this a cautionary tale of someone who doesn't have faith? And I think, again, because it represents what I think to be the average Christian in America today, that there is faith that we have and faith that we exercise, but there's also the human element of weakness. And Obadiah it's very clear from what he has done that just to think of the Apostle Paul and to think of Jesus Christ, probably better. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. If this is all you're asking me to do, I'm all on board. But if it's going to cost me some pain, then I become weak. Then I melt into a puddle. The lion becomes the lamb at that point. And so I think it's both. I think that we can see the example, and that's why I brought up the subject of redemption, when you're looking at Obadiah, because he's asked, and then the excuses, much in the same way with Moses, the excuses, he could have simply not said any of that and said no, because that's what the excuses are. He's saying, no, I'm not going to do this because he's going to kill me. And I'm going to draw it out poetically so that I can try and make my case to the prophet who might put in a good word with God for me. But I'm saying no. And then Elijah gives him the encouragement, and he finally decides to go. And so what he's done in the past and what he's willing to do in the future, the spirit's willing, the flesh is weak, which is all of us, which is just the human condition that we all have to live with. And so, but I also think it's important before the flesh can get there, before we can get our hands and feet doing the work of righteousness, the spirit has to be willing. It doesn't start with the flesh. Your spirit has to be willing first before you can get your flesh to do anything. Because if all you're doing is saying, well, this is what I'm supposed to do, so I'm going to begrudgingly do it, and I'm going to grit my teeth while I do it, but I'm going to do it. That's not going to last very long, because the spirit has to be willing first. And that's kind of the second thing I want to bring up here, because we often think of the good deeds being faith. So as we're examining this question, let's ask ourselves this. If you had the description of Obadiah, but all you had was verse 4, okay, which verse 4 is where it says he feared the Lord greatly. I think that's verse 4. Is that not verse 4?
And when Jezebel cut off the prophets of the Lord,
It must be verse 3.
and
No, it is verse 3. It's the end of verse 3 right before you get to verse 4. It said, and Ahab called Obadiah, who was over the household. Now Obadiah feared the Lord greatly. Okay, so let's say that's the only description you had of it. Okay, Ahab called Obadiah, and Obadiah feared the Lord greatly. And then you move right into the let's go find some water. Okay, I'm going to meet Elijah. And then when Elijah asked him, let's just say Obadiah says no, because if I go, Ahab's going to kill me. So essentially what you're taking out here, what I'm asking you in your mind's eye to take out here is a description of him going and hiding 100 prophets of the Lord. Let's pretend it's not even in there. Okay? The deed is not even in there. Would you, and try and answer honestly, because again, hindsight 2020, we know the end of the story. But would you then say Obadiah was a man of strong faith? Without the example of him hiding the prophets. You know what I mean?
yeah,
How much does that bear on our view of who Obadiah is?
yeah. So you're saying the only thing we know is he feared God greatly, and he said no.
Yeah.
That's all we know.
That's if that was the only description. And the reason I'm asking that, go ahead,
But
Bobby.
he did it anyway, right?
Well, he got the encouragement, yeah, but
Oh, okay.
yeah, he got the encouragement from Elijah, but yeah. We tend to equate, and there is some. I think that there's some fruit that we see and all that sort of thing, but we tend to equate faith and good deeds in the sense of, in the sense of a social gospel where. And here's I'll explain the good part of it, and then I'll explain the dangerous part of it. In the sense that if we are people of faith, then it's going to we're going to have to show that faith in what we do. And so we're going to do mercy ministries. We're going to provide food. We're going to provide shelter. We're going to help families in need. All of these good things. The social gospel has now expanded into more of the liberalization of the gospel in terms of. Social gospel proponents will be very big on basically anybody in the world who wants to come to America, we should let them, type thing. And we should, not only that, we should care for them. And I won't pay for it out of my pocket, but we should pay for it out of our collective pockets, type thing. But so you have that, but then the negative side of the social gospel has become somebody doesn't profess faith, somebody has no desire to learn or to worship or to be discipled or to disciple others, but they are very charitable in what they do with their money and with volunteering at shelters and all these different things. So simply by their deeds, we know that they're a Christian, even though they never said they were a Christian. Even though if you asked them, they'd probably give you one of these postmodern. Well, I'm not a Christian. I don't ascribe to any institutionalized religion, but I am spiritual. Oh, he said spirituals, and he's doing all these good things, so he must be a Christian. He's saying. So that's the negative. That's the negative side of basing every opinion or every belief that we are either right with God or wrong with God on a social gospel approach, just on what we do. And so, what we have again, just in much the same way that the spirit has to come before the flesh. I think that the spirit in which we do the things is just as important as the things that we do, and so to put that in a real world example, the Lord is pleased with a Christian food bank who not only delivers food but also shares the gospel and helps with the spiritual side of it, more than he is pleased with just a food bank that hands you your meal and says vote for XYZ, next time if you want to keep eating. You see what I'm saying? It's not just the thing that we do. They both have the same mission, so to speak. No, they don't have both the same mission. That's a terrible word. They both have the same resources. There we go. They both have the same resources in the sense that they're providing food. But the mission is different, and that this one is for the glory of God, and this one is just, for the glory of humanity in some way, shape, or form. And so I would just say be very careful in forming our opinions of people solely on the good deeds that they do, because it can be, there are a lot of good deeds done in the name of someone other than the Lord. there are a lot of good deeds done to care for people that are done for the sole purpose of turning people away from the Lord. And so it's we have to be very careful in that social gospel aspect of how we view it. I personally, I don't like labels in general, but I certainly don't like qualifiers to certain things. So I don't like things like social gospel or I don't even like evangelical Christian. I certainly don't like conservative evangelical Christian, because those three words are going to mean three, totally different things to different people. And so it's, our understanding of what to do with our behavior needs to be found in the Bible. It needs to be done for the glory of God. And if others want to throw labels on that, then and to a certain extent, labels are necessary to identify us and to gather us together and things like that. But it's always for the glory of God. It's not for the glory of conservative Christian evangelicalism or Roman Catholicism or anything else that you qualify that with. It's for the glory of God. Going back to the character of Obadiah and putting him next to Elijah, this shows us a great example of two different ways to serve God. And so, remind me, what was Obadiah's profession?
Head of the household.
Yeah, he was the number two. He was essentially the chief of staff. My mind automatically went to Haman. In the book of Esther, works out a little bit better for Obadiah than does Haman, but yeah. Leah McGarry. Yeah. Okay. You don't have to. One, I can hear you when you hide your mouth. Okay. I don't.
Is Lance listening?
Yeah, I don't. I'm not to the point where I have to lip read along with hearing. I can actually hear you when you hold it up to your
We
face.
both know the name.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just that we can't recall it.
Yeah, Leo McGarry.
Yeah.
Until he has a heart attack and then becomes C.J. Craig, and then Matt Santos is elected and Josh Lyman becomes the chief of staff. Yeah. So, yeah, just
No, this is
yeah,
a serious.
there's a TV show from the 1990s. Okay, but anyway,
Why?
so
Because he was second man. I can relate Obadiah's position because I relate to.
it's very good. That would be an excellent example. Back to my example. Obadiah and Elijah show us two different ways to serve God. And so Obadiah was the chief of staff, the head of the house, the one who was the confidant and the right hand man of the king. And so this is more of what we think of as a political position, as we think of as a governmental service position. Whereas Elijah's is a prophet of God. He is a vocational minister. And both of them are serving the Lord, serving the purposes of the Lord, are exactly where God wants them to be, but they're doing two very different things. And so the idea that the Lord wants every strong person of faith to become a pastor is false, and we need to get that out of our minds completely. There's a lot of I think there's a lot of churches who do disservice to especially some of your young men who they see strong faith, they see them wanting to work within the church, and so they essentially push them into the pastorate when they're not actually called. The Lord needs servants of the church who know how to do all sorts of different jobs and who are in all sorts of different fields. If the faithful servants of God all went into vocational ministry, there would be no missionaries in the workforce, in the places that we really need to be to bring people into the family of faith through our relationships. And so this is just another example of how the Lord is using a vocation other than occupational ministry for the good of the kingdom of God. And again, Obadiah isn't exactly the place that the Lord wants him to be. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, the Apostle Paul says, there are a variety of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are a variety of service, but the same Lord, or the same God. And there are varieties of activities, but it's the same God who empowers them in everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. And so this is what the Apostle Paul is saying, and what he's saying here is there are huge numbers of opportunities in which we can serve the Lord. There are tremendous ways, and there are ways in which the Lord wants to use us specifically, not just within vocational ministry. Probably the greatest example of this would be within the book of Judges, because largely, if not entirely, and I know a lot of it depends on how you view Samuel. Some people view Samuel as strictly a prophet. Some of them view him as the last judge within the book of Judges that was also a prophet. But taking him out of the equation, the majority of the judges, if not the entirety of the judges, were not vocational ministers. They were people who were put in a socio-political climate to judge and in some instances protect the people of Israel from the enemies, or to bring them back to God, but to do it in a socio-political and not a vocational prophet, priest, pastor, rabbi type of way. And so lots of different ministries that we have to serve the Lord. And I think we need to focus more. Here with our specific church, and then also with the church worldwide, I think we need to focus more on how these different positions that the Lord has put us in can be used for the good of the kingdom of God, and how we can use that vocation and those talents and those abilities that the Lord has given us for the good of the kingdom of God. And if we were able to do that, I don't know, maybe it wouldn't seem so, the idea of church wouldn't seem so standoffish to a lot of people who just aren't familiar with the way things go on. And so just something to think about. Verse 3, Obadiah is described as a man who fears the Lord greatly. Why is the fear of the Lord an important part of faith? We're going to talk a little more about this on Sunday too, because it comes up again. Or I'm going to bring it up again this coming Sunday. But why is the fear of the Lord an important part of our faith?
Well, I think it tells us about our faith, because, I could have faith in you, but you are not the creator. You are not the all-powerful. I can have fear to know that at any minute, he could strike me dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's absolutely true.
Have faith in that.
That he would or won't.
Because some people don't believe that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's how I should have wrapped it up. Is that
Because some people
if you
believe
don't
that.
have that.
Some people believe that he would never do this because I'm so good, type of thing. Or at least there's people a whole lot worse than me. It would start with
Or
them.
he's a God of love.
God of love and grace, and all that. They're not gonna send a thunderbolt, type stuff. But think about instances of times when you have been afraid. You could. It could be something as simple as, when we were kids or kids today. You're afraid when you're getting ready to take a test. Why are you afraid when you're getting ready to take a test? Well, you might not know some things. Okay, you don't know them, but it's graded. Okay, so it's graded. Yeah, but that grade reflects on more than just this one test. Well, who grades it? Well, the teacher. Well, there should be a healthy fear of the teacher. Along that way. Think about your parents. If you got in trouble, that was my first. I don't remember being afraid of an animal. I don't remember being afraid of gravity. I don't remember being afraid of any. The first thing I remember being afraid of was my parents. Whenever I got in trouble, I did something wrong. You throw a ball and you bust a lamp. There's this fear. There's not this fascination that something just broke. There's not this, wow, man, you threw that hard. No, there's fear. the fact that there used to be a lamp there and the fact that we were throwing a ball doesn't even enter the picture. It's just straight fear. Because you realize that there is somebody who is over you, that has power over you, that is going to judge you in a sense. And so when we don't have a fear of the Lord, and people who have a problem talking about fear in the Lord, I can't help but think it's because they somehow picture themselves, if not on the same level, close to the same level as the Lord. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, the Lord wouldn't do this to me. Well, why do you think your opinion matters at all to what the Lord's going to do? You know, it doesn't. And so it's, you know, there's so much that we place this importance on, and we spend all of our time, worrying about and thinking about. But is it really something that the Lord is going to care a whole lot about? It's don't tell my kids this, because we're playing a championship game Saturday. All right, don't tell them this. But the Lord doesn't care if they win Saturday. He cares how they play. You know, is this in a manner that brings honor and glory to the name of God? And so, but they better win. But we don't think about that stuff. You know, we don't get. I never. And I was. You know, I tried to display my faith on the field and whenever I was playing and stuff like that. But I can't remember going into a game worried that I was going to somehow dishonor the name of God. You know, I was worried I wasn't going to play well. You know, I was worried I might do something stupid, but I wasn't worried that I was going to dishonor the name of God. When in reality, that should have been the thing that I was worried about the most. That should have been the thing that I was focused on the most. And so, the idea that he hides prophets is great. The idea that he's willing to go to Ahab is great. But all of that starts with the fact that he recognizes just what you said. That he recognizes, I have faith in Elijah. I have faith in other people. I have faith in these prophets that I'm hiding. But I do not fear them in the way that I fear the Creator God. I'm even afraid of Elijah. Or not Elijah, I'm even afraid of Ahab, what Ahab might do to me. But when I get the assurance from Elijah, the Lord's not going to desert you. I promise you, I'm going to go see Ahab today. Now, I have a much higher fear of God than I do of Ahab. And so, we got to get back to the fear of the Lord. I mean, we got to instill it in the younger generation more so than we have. Because we have been, and rightly so, every time I say this, I always, and even with this small group, I always have to preface this. God is a God, we will never measure up to the mercy and the grace and all of that extended to us. He is not sitting on his throne in heaven waiting for us to do something wrong so he can smash us like an ant. This is not what the Lord's doing. At the same time, one day he is going to judge the world. And that's going to include us. And that's going to include unfolding of everything we've ever done, everything we've ever thought, every person we've ever thought it about. And it is not something that we go into with a nonchalant confidence. It's something that we go into with fear that he is God and we are not, and the respect of that position against the lack of position that the rest of us have, and we need to start instilling that better in the next generation, because if we don't, we're going to grow up. We have an entire generation who grows up thinking that Jesus is their homeboy, and he's not. He's their king and their savior, and they should submit themselves to him. While at the same time, I think that part of that reason that we're lacking that type of fear is we just, and here again, it's not morbid. Okay, I'm not a morbid person. But we don't think about eternity and we don't think about death enough. I mean, and part of it is because my generation has never been faced with a war. There's never been a chance where, my generation, until COVID, I guess, but even my generation within COVID wasn't a big chance of this hurting us. We didn't have polio. We didn't have, all of these major things. We didn't have World War II. We didn't have Vietnam or Korea or any of these different things. And so we have we have grown up with this comfort of just knowing from day to day everything's going to be fine. Yeah, one day I'm going to get old. Yeah, one day I'm going to die. But that's years from now. And let me tell you, it goes fast. Okay? It is not, I was just thinking about this the other day because, I'm getting ready to turn 39. Stephanie already turned 39. And so, I mean, you look at me and then you look at, but I'm middle-aged, I mean, do you realize I am middle-aged? I'm halfway through my life. And
We're not.
yeah, no, you're well. Sorry, you're finishing up the third quarter. Okay, you haven't started the fourth quarter quite yet. But we'll give you. We'll hope for longevity. But it's trying to talk to somebody about that. All you get now is it's just that's morbid. I don't want to think about that. But we're on this earth to work and to serve and to be tested, as gold is refined by fire, for a short period of time.
Like a vapor.
Yeah. And then it's the rest. And so if we don't think about that, at least a little bit in the sense that we think about God and we think about our relationship with God, then we are not living our lives in a very intelligent way. Because again, short lifespan, halfway done right here. Short lifespan, long eternity. And it doesn't need to be the focus, even at the risk of sounding morbid or sounding like we're not talking about the God of grace. We're only talking about the God of wrath and judgment and fear and all these different things. There are definitely subjects that we need to bring up, and we need to feel comfortable. The mature people of God, which you guys are, maybe Nancy, but you guys are the mature people of God. We need to at least feel comfortable talking with other people about. We don't have to all get up into a podium and preach and all this sort of thing. But we at least need to feel comfortable if the subject is broached to talk about, one day we're all going to die. And there's going to be judgment. There's not just going to be mercy and grace and compassion. There's going to be judgment. Are we ready to face that Lord, the Lord of the Bible? And we don't talk about it enough, I don't think. Thoughts, questions, concerns?
I mean, I'll confess to that. That's the truth. That I don't think I don't think seriously enough about a lot of the stuff that you talk about. Not just the fear and awness of God, but also what I should be doing with my minute by minute life. Which is more than what I do, for sure. That's once you pointed out.
Well, I think that I think you probably do think about it seriously. I think we all just don't think about it enough. It just doesn't come to our mind enough.
It's been a big difference with me in the last 1 or 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I'm thinking about, I want to get things. This is ridiculous because it's nothing spiritual, but I think I want to get rid of all my clutters, and my children don't have to do that.
Yeah.
But there was a time that would have never crossed my mind.
Well,
and I'm thinking
your children will appreciate it. Okay. So, yeah.
And I want my children to appreciate me even after I'm gone.
Yeah.
But I do think about it. You get to we don't even want to talk about what part of my life is gone. According to the Bible, I've already had my span.
Yeah.
So this is all just great.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I think about with Pat is, she talks about, because she's talked to us about, cleaning out her clutter. And, that's like a drop in the bucket, literally, to, for your family to have to take care of.
Mm.
It's nothing.
Right. It's the real thing. But, it's,
Because I've been there, I've done it.
Yeah, I know.
well, I have to.
And it was, there's a lot more there
Oh,
for me than what you've got, and I know that your family won't have any problem with.
Yeah.
I mean, so it isn't something to worry about. But, you know, there's more important things to,
Yeah, like how much shame I'm gonna have when I stand in the judgment. I mean, I just, sometimes I almost literally feel that. I don't know about y'all, but if I'm ashamed of something I do, it's a physical thing that comes over me.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it's gonna be like standing there
Well,
with him knowing every thought I've ever had.
well, and I cannot remember what it was. And we're recording, so I wouldn't tell you even if I could. But I can't remember what it was. But this was probably several years before COVID, I know. But it was something that I did. And it didn't have anything to do with church. But it was just something. And it bothered me for 4 or 5 days. Just because it wasn't necessarily in the sense that I was ashamed of the fact that I could have done it a whole lot better. And I didn't. And I cannot remember what it was. But it just, I know it eats at you.
It does.
And that's just, you talk about drops in the bucket. That's just a drop in the bucket compared to.
And I mean, it's like, what, I just don't know how to say how much I'm so glad and I'm so thankful that I picture, because I'm a visual person too. I mean, I love words, but I picture that when the final comes, God is not gonna judge. He's gonna judge all that I've done. I'm gonna answer for everything that I've done in this life. But for the final judgment, he's not gonna see that. He's gonna see the blood.
Right.
And, you know. And
Well, I think that also shows the mercy and the grace of God. Because imagine having all of these negative things, anything you've ever done in your life, all of these negative things, and then just having him say, all of this is covered by that guy right there. You know, all of this you don't have to pay for because how much does that show the power of God and the forgiveness of God that he's able to do that? Because you know, I hope this isn't how it is, but I imagine this could be how it is. I mean, you know, because you get there and you got this confidence, you know Christ is your Savior, and you get there, and then all of this stuff is laid out in front of you, just like,
Is he really?
Is this gonna work? You know, is this gonna work? I did not think I'd be this bad. You know,
You know, because most of us think of ourselves as pretty good.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Okay, I need some explanation, and
Okay.
maybe it's because I don't know the differences and the point for the different judgments, but, you know, there's the verse that says, and your sins will be thrown as far as the east is
to
from
the
the
west. Yeah.
So what does that mean if we still are going to be judged?
It's all, yeah, it's confusing. But and there's even, you know, not so much discussion within our particular realm and sphere and all that sort of stuff, but within the independent Baptist circles, they have a huge emphasis on what the Bible calls Great White Throne Judgment, which is kind of like the second go around within end times and all that sort of stuff. But it's again, the focus is that we are judged, and there's even scriptural passages that, in Jesus for one, telling the disciples, that's not your place. You know, can we sit beside you in glory? That's not your place. You know, that's for who the Lord decides is. So there's even an understanding that there's a judgment in the sense that, you know, we're going to separate the sheep and the goats type of judgment. But then there's also a judgment in, okay, this is the place of honor. This is for you. You know, you're here and we love you and you're accepted, but this is not your place. This is for this person. And almost, and I don't like talking about it, especially with younger people, because all of a sudden we can become reward driven. Mm-hmm. But there is this idea of even those who make it into heaven will not all be equal. There will be greater positions of honor even in heaven. And so that's, and I think all of that goes into judgment. All of that goes into our deeds are laid bare. We trust in Christ, so He covers them all. But there is there's a separating the sheep and the goats, but this sheep looks prettier than the rest of them type thing. And so.
She kept her wool whiter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what we think of you, Miss Pat. So,
Oh, that's cute.
but in terms of
But I know.
yeah, but in terms of eternal judgment, I wish I could tell you that there's a definitive, agreed upon type understanding of how it takes place, but there's just not. You know, up until the point that you even have, you know, modern day Catholics, even Anglicans such as C.S. Lewis and people like that who lived in the modern day, they believed in purgatory until the day they died. That there's this second judgment in which we have to further atone for certain deeds within life, and then we get to be accepted, which is nowhere in the Bible. It's all a traditional type of Catholic belief, but again, there's no agreement on exactly how it happens, or you know what mechanism the Lord uses to usher people in or kick people out, or however He's going to do it. You know,
Yeah.
I'm even trying to find the correct verbs because you know you don't even know how He's going to do it, and so. But good talk. Let me pray for us, and then we'll